Well, good evening and welcome to Redefining Airmanship session. Good evening and welcome to Redefining Airmanship session number 3 of 6. Glad you could join me. And again, just a quick review of how to operate the GoToWebinar system. If you want to minimize your control panel, that little orange arrow will do it, or you can then expand it again. If you want to raise your hand, just press on this raise your hand icon, and I can see it on my control panel. If you want to send me a text message, a question or anything, just go ahead and type it into this box and then send it by pressing that button. In this session 3, we're going to take a look at Kern's airmanship model again, and we're going to look at the capstone outcomes of situational awareness and judgment. This is a Wings program seminar, so we'll get 1 knowledge credit for attending tonight. And the question that I've been asking all along that I'd like you to continue to consider: if I don't fly right, should I fly at all? And again, hopefully by the end of this webinar series, you'll be able to answer that question for yourself. The webinar series is based on the book Redefining Airmanship by Tony Kern. Quick review of sessions 1 and 2 in case you didn't join us for one of those, or even if you did, probably a good idea just to step back for a second and review them. We talked about, in both sessions 1 and 2, Kern's airmanship model, starting with the bedrock principles of discipline, skill, and proficiency, upon which sit the 5 pillars of knowledge: self, aircraft, team, environment, and risk. And upon the 5 pillars of knowledge rest the capstone outcomes of situational awareness and judgment. And as you'll recall, we've been using this model to provide a framework for us to talk about airmanship, and later on you'll see how we'll use this model to provide a framework for your own personal airmanship development plan. Session 1, we talked about the bedrock principles, and let's review those quickly. We came up with a shared definition of airmanship in session 1, and we agreed that expert airmen possess discipline, skill, and proficiency. Expert airmen have a thorough understanding of themselves, their aircraft, their team, their environment, and the risks they face. And expert airmen consistently display exceptional situational awareness and use good judgment at all times. So that's the shared definition of airmanship, and if you agree with that definition, please raise your hand now by clicking on the little raise your hand icon. Okay, great, thank you. See that we're all in agreement on that. So let's review each one of those bedrock principles of discipline, skill, and proficiency, and then we'll review very quickly the 5 pillars of knowledge, and then we'll focus tonight on the capstone outcomes of situational awareness and judgment. So starting with the bedrock principle of discipline, we define flight discipline as the ability and willpower, so both of those things, to safely employ an aircraft within operational, regulatory, organizational, and common sense guidelines. And Kern made the statement, and I agree with him, that flight discipline must be the foundation of an aviator's airmanship package. Let's review skill. Flying requires multiple skills that are developed in and out of formal training. Most of us think that we develop our skills in formal training, but we're developing those skills, for good or bad, all the time when we're flying. In addition to physical flying skills, excellent airmanship requires excellent communication skills, decision-making skills, team skills, self-assessment skills, with self-assessment skills being the most important of all of those skills, but of course you have to be pretty good at all of them. Let's review proficiency. Experience builds airmanship skills. Recent experience accounts for proficiency. Less than 500 hours in model, we're at significantly greater risk for pilot error. Less than 10 flight hours in 30 days, we're at a far greater risk than if we're flying the optimum, which is 10 to 30 hours a month, 10 hours a month being the sweet spot. And anything over 30 hours a month, actually proficiency starts degrading. And keep in mind, just because it's legal doesn't mean that it's safe. We can have our 3 takeoffs and landings in 90 days, but we may not be proficient in crosswind landings. And the real bad news here is flight skill loss occurs rapidly. If we don't fly often, those skills are going to start deteriorating. And another piece of bad news for us, pilots are not good at self-assessing their proficiency in specific flight tasks. So you really need to be having other people looking over your shoulder periodically to make sure that your skills are up to the proficiency level. And in the second session, we hit the 5 pillars of knowledge, starting with self, aircraft, team, environment, and risk. Let's take a quick look at self. Socrates says, know thyself. And as I mentioned last time, that's very important to keep in mind when we're talking about airmanship. Kern says the most critical component of the airmanship model is you. Kern's quotes on personal airworthiness out of his book, Redefining Airmanship. Airworthiness is a personal responsibility. It rests on our physical and psychological boundaries. If we fail to appreciate this fact, we undercut any efforts towards improvement. Although it's critically important to recognize when we are impaired, it is much easier to stay physically and psychologically healthy. This increases personal performance potential and makes it much easier to recognize impairment. Reviewing aircraft, pillar of knowledge of aircraft. Knowledge of aircraft is not merely being able to handle or operate a given type of airplane. It's a genuine desire to make the machine an extension of yourself. And as I mentioned last time, I've been thinking lately that the airplane really goes with us. It follows us where we're going. I just noticed that Ed Marks has his hand up. So Ed, I'm going to open up your mic. You have a question or comment. Go ahead, please.
Don't worry. I'm sorry. I hit the wrong button.
Okay, no problem at all, Ed. I'm going to mute you. Airmanship, knowledge of aircraft, is a genuine desire to make the machine an extension of yourself, and we have to think of it that way. We don't think of it as operating a machine. We think of that airplane being an extension of ourselves, and it flies with us. Like other social arrangements, this relationship must be based on knowledge, understanding, and trust. And we talked about team last time, the pillar of knowledge, team. Teamwork seeks to improve performance in 3 primary ways. It adds to the pool of knowledge and expertise available to confront various situations. 2 heads are better than 1. It allows for a synthesis of ideas and skills to make new options available to the group. Expert teams are capable of synergy. In other words, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Teamwork is an aviator's insurance policy. If you're out there really solo, no team around you, you're flying at a higher risk. Environment. Kern says knowledge of the environment is by far the most difficult of the pillars of knowledge to master. Begin with a solid understanding of the physical environment. Make flight planning a methodical exercise that completely covers all the environmental factors you might encounter in flight. And as I mentioned, a checklist is a good idea for all your pre-flight planning. The multi-layered regulatory environment is of critical importance to the physical longevity of all aviators. Remember, my opinion is most, if not all, of the FARs are written in blood. Find out about your organization, seek the true values, and work to improve them if necessary. Finally, be at home in these environments. Swim like a fish in them. And finally, the pillar of knowledge of risk that we talked about in Session 2. The reason for risk? Where there is no risk, there is usually no opportunity. We constantly make decisions that affect our effectiveness, efficiency, and safety. Risk-taking. Risk is the probability and severity of a loss linked to a hazard. So we weigh the probability and the severity of an accident against whatever hazard is we're evaluating. Aviators manage risk by controlling it, avoiding it, reducing it, spreading it, transferring it, and there are some other techniques we can use. But the good news is we can learn all of these to reduce our risk. Kern's statements on risk from the book: aviation will never be completely free of risk. The ability of an airman to understand and analyze multiple risk factors and then act on them using skill and good judgment will always be one of the principal benchmarks of expertise in aviation. Are there any questions or comments at this point? If there are, please raise your hand or type them in the box and send them to me. I'll give you a minute to think about it. Ed, I see your hand up again. Do you have a question, or was that a slip of the clicker again?
I'm not sure. It says my hand is down.
Say that again, please.
It says my hand is down.
Huh. Okay, must just be the system then. I will ignore your hand being raised, so if you do have a question, please use the text method of sending me a question.
That's good to me.
All right, thanks a lot, Ed. All right, I've muted Ed, so we don't have any other questions or comments at this point, so let's move along. And let's take a look at the new material we want to cover tonight, which is the capstone outcomes of situational awareness and judgment. Let's look at situational awareness first. An F-111 weapons system officer during Desert Storm was recorded on the cockpit voice recorder as saying, "Are they shooting at us?" Now, do you think that guy was situationally aware or not? Kern says situational awareness is the filter through which every aviator's action must be viewed. So situational awareness, extremely important in the process here of excellent airmanship. Personal view by John Houston, who was a World War II B-17 pilot. He says, teamwork is an essential part of good situational awareness. Good situational awareness is essential to success in aviation. Although we have made a quantum leap forward in many areas of science and technology, the need for good situational awareness remains constant. So when I read that last statement is we have all this new technology. We have glass cockpits. We have traffic information systems, terrain awareness warning systems. All of those things help us. But we have to learn how to use them properly and constantly renew our knowledge of how to use them properly to maintain good situational awareness. Situational awareness, or as we usually refer to it, SA, can be considered a feeder fix for judgment and decision making. Those of you who are instrument-rated pilots know that there are feeder fixes on a lot of instrument approaches, and that's a fix that ATC will usually use, usually send you over that fix to feed you into the flow for the approach. It might be an initial approach fix. That's a good example of a feeder fix. Well, for situational awareness, that's the feeder fix for good judgment decision making. In other words, if you don't have good situational awareness, your judgment and decision making will be defective. With SA, a pilot can construct an accurate mental model of reality. With SA, a pilot can project potential courses of action against likely future scenarios. With SA, a pilot can fly efficiently, taking advantage of opportunities and avoiding pitfalls. Without SA, we misperceive important cues or proceed blindly into the unknown. There are 5 essential situational awareness questions. My first one is not one of the 5, but do you think that cat is really situationally aware? I don't think so. Okay, first essential question. What is situational awareness? How important is it? How do we recognize loss of SA? What should we do if we lose SA? What can we do to improve SA? And of course, we're going to take a look at each one of these. What is SA? SA is the accurate perception of what is going on both now and in the near future. When perception matches reality, and you are able to act on it in a timely and rational manner, you have SA. Situational awareness is the accurate perception of what is going on both now and in the near future. We can look at SA by terms of this diagram that we're looking at here. SA is at the center, and if it is within the circle of what has happened, the circle of what is happening, and the circle of what might happen, then you have SA. Now, here's a little test for you. Can you spot the loss of situational awareness in this picture? And I'll give you a minute to look at it. I'll give you a hint. This picture was taken at a Navy-U.S. Air Force football game. If you think you have spotted the loss of SA in this picture, raise your hand. Andrew, I have your mic open. Do you spot it? Andrew, are you there? No, I'm not getting you, Andrew, so I'm muting your mic again. John Munson, you see the loss of situational awareness there? John, I'm not getting you either, so I don't know if you guys have a problem on your end or I have a problem on my end, but I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what it is. It was supposed to be Go Navy. It had should have been 3 more people in that lineup there when they took the picture. So they obviously lost situational awareness, and in this age of YouTube, I'm sure this has come back to haunt them many, many times. So it's critical to understand the role of time in the SA equation. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Pilots understand the need to stay ahead of the airplane. To stay ahead of the airplane, an aviator has to be able to accurately perceive the elements of a current situation, comprehend their meaning, project their implications on likely future scenarios. There are 3 levels of situational awareness. Number 1 is able to perceive a relevant cue, i.e. like a warning light. 2, able to put an observed event into the big picture. Okay, I have a alternator light on. What does that mean? The big picture is I'm flying day VFR and there's my home airport under me, or I'm in the clouds and it's 200.5 below me for a couple hundred miles around and I've got another 2 hours to go. Different situation depending on the big picture. Number 3, third level of SA is you're able to see the implications of the event on future courses of actions. So if I'm in the clouds, 2 hours to go, that alternator warning light might mean that I'm going to be down to battery power pretty quick, or maybe I already am. So again, it's able to see the implications of that cue. A lot of us will say situational awareness, I know it when I see it. Here's how 173 F-15 pilots in one squadron view good SA. Good SA, you build a composite picture of the entire situation in 3 dimensions. You assimilate the information from multiple sources. Know spatial position and geometric relationships. Periodically update the current dynamic situation. Prioritize information and actions, and then make quality and timely decisions. And then you project the current situation into the future. So that's one way to look at SA, one method of achieving and acting on SA. There are many other ways to look at it, many other methods. And as you get deeper and deeper into the program of airmanship development, we will actually have full-blown courses on how to do this and training programs on how you can do this so this can be automatic for you. But it's definitely something you can learn. How important is SA? Number 2. Case studies and accident analyses from all areas of aviation tell us that SA is essential. In an analysis of all Air Force mishaps from 89 through 95, loss of SA was the single largest contributing factor. Another Air Force study of air-to-air combat kills estimated that 90% of all aircraft that were shot down never even saw their attacker. So according to the Air Force, very, very important. And of course, that applies to general aviation. We all know that. How do we recognize loss of SA? That's the third essential question. If we have ambiguity or confusion, that's a key, it's a clue, it's a warning sign, it's a warning light. If you feel something isn't quite right with this picture, if you're not sure, that's ambiguity. Or if you thought you did something but thought you went direct to a waypoint, but that's not quite the waypoint you thought you were going to, confusion. That's a warning light that you're losing SA. Or fixation. If you find yourself fixating on the attitude indicator when you're flying instruments and not scanning around the cockpit, that's usually a good warning sign that you're starting to lose SA. If there's a reduced frequency of your radio calls, or you're slow to get back, or you're not saying the right things, you're stumbling over your words, warning light, losing situational awareness. Failure to meet targets. For some reason, you're 5 minutes late over the checkpoint. Something's wrong with that picture. Or you say, I'm going to switch tanks at 30 minutes, and then you forget about it. Failure to meet your targets. A warning light. Reduced maneuvering. You find yourself hand flying on instruments, but your corrections are bigger because it takes longer for you to start to make a correction. You're starting to lose SA. Failure to stay ahead of the airplane, of course, is the big one that we learned from day one, is we're losing situational awareness if we're not staying ahead of the airplane. And the use of an undocumented procedure. If you're going to ignore a checklist and do something in the airplane that you should be doing by the checklist, or if you're going to use your own homebrew procedure for something that's not in the airplane flight manual, that's a warning light. That's a sign that you're starting to lose situational awareness, because that's showing that your knowledge of aircraft, pillar of knowledge, is deficient. Violation of a limitation or a minimum. That's a warning light that you're losing situational awareness. So again, by knowing these particular warning signs for loss of SA, training with them, you can get really good at knowing when you're starting to lose SA and then take remedial action. We're going to talk about that. So, lost SA. Take a look at that cartoon. I think those guys lost SA, don't you? Loss of SA can occur gradually or all at once. You can gradually lose or get behind the airplane, or everything was going along fine, something happened, maybe you went over that fatigue line, but all of a sudden you're not in the game. You've lost SA. It can happen gradually or all at once. Lost SA seriously degrades the ability to achieve flight objectives and is often the prime factor in accidents. We saw that in that Air Force study, and I'd invite you, next time you're reading through various aircraft accident reports, see if you can find that loss of situational awareness in there in the causes. You'll see it frequently. There are nearly always sufficient cues available for recognition and recovery from lost situational awareness. So you have to be aware of the cues, be sensitive to them, but they're usually always there, so you can to tell you you're losing SA. And the big essential question number 4, what should you do if you lose SA? First thing, get away from the dirt. You know, if you think about it, other than getting smacked into by another airplane or flying into a thunderstorm or severe turbulence and having it rip your airplane apart, it's pretty hard to get hurt in an airplane unless you hit the dirt. So if you get that, if you see one of those warning lights that you're losing SA, your first priority is getting away from the dirt. Get to a safe altitude, get the airplane under control. Stabilize the aircraft is your second step. Then buy some time. If ATC is bugging you to do something, if let's say you're an instrument flight, just say stand by. Get yourself some time to analyze the situation. Seek all that information, inquiry, look at your nav display, look at your engine parameters, look at all of the things that you normally keep in your scan that you're always integrating into your situational awareness model. Look around and get that information back in the game. Then evaluate that information. What's wrong with this picture? My attitude indicator showing wings level, nose and horizon. My turn indicator is showing a left bank, and my directional gyro is showing a left turn. So you evaluate that information. In that case, you'd come up with the answer, oops, failing attitude indicator. Regain the SA by going through these steps. And then finally, learn from that experience, because we are going to lose SA from time to time to greater and lesser degrees. And every time that happens, we have to critique ourselves and learn from that experience. So that's all you have to do if you lose SA. And the essential question number 5, what can we do to improve situational awareness? Use the technology, moving maps, glass displays, head-up displays, whatever it might be, whatever we can put in our aircraft to use to improve SA, use it. Define roles. And this is very critical if 2 pilots are flying in the same airplane, because if the roles aren't clearly defined, things can get screwed up in a hurry and both pilots can lose SA. But even if you're flying alone, define your role completely as to what it is you need to do to maintain SA at all times. Manage distractions. This is becoming a hot topic with the FAA right now. It's proven to be a contributing factor in many, many accidents, cockpit distractions. And as we know, there's techniques and procedures like sterile cockpit and so forth that we can use to manage distractions. Reduce the overload. If you feel you're in that overload situation, reduce it. And we looked at this graphic in a different format, and I think in session 2, where your pilot capabilities, really that's your airman level of airmanship. And then as the flight progresses, the requirements, the load, the task requirements goes up and down. And the difference between your capabilities and the requirements, task requirements, is your margin of safety. And of course, if your overload, if your task requirements start to push up to and through your capabilities, you need to reduce your workload. So you need to learn how to do that the appropriate way, but you can learn it. And 5, avoid complacency. That's one of the big factors in slipping into loss of SA, is complacency. Always test your assumptions. I do agree with Ronnie Reagan on one thing in particular, and that is the way he used to always talk about the Russians. Trust but verify. So always test your assumptions. Very important technique. And then intervene. If you find that you're losing SA, run through your recovery of SA procedures and get it back. Intervene in the situation. Don't just sit there. So what Kern has to say on situational awareness is, from the book, SA feeds aviator decision-making and judgment. SA cannot be viewed in isolation. All foundations and pillars of airmanship that we've talked about can support or detract from SA. SA can and should be improved by individual effort, so you can get better at it. SA is not an innate quality, but rather a higher echelon piece of the airmanship whole. And this is a very important point. A lot of inexperienced pilots look at the old heads and say, boy, that guy's got it together. He's always ahead of the airplane. He's got SA. He's just got the talent. He's a professional. He can do that. Well, you can improve your SA. You can learn the techniques, practice them, get trained, and you can improve your SA constantly. And we can improve it to whichever degree we have the will and discipline to achieve. And let me back up just one second. There's another point on SA. If you think about it, yeah, this is all about flying, being a pilot. But if you transfer these techniques and these abilities into your personal life, think about how better situational awareness in your life in general can improve things. All right, let's tackle the final capstone outcome, which is kind of the end result of all these things we've been talking about so far in Kern's airmanship model, and that is the capstone outcome of judgment. Charles Gow says, judgment is not the knowledge of fundamental laws. It is knowing how to apply a knowledge of them. So remember, all of our fundamental knowledge is in those 5 pillars of knowledge. That filters through our situational awareness, and then that results in judgment. So judgment isn't the actual knowledge of the information in those 5 pillars. It's the use and the outcome, really, of those 5 pillars of knowledge. Kern says about judgment, good judgment sits at the pinnacle of airmanship. That's what this is all about, is good judgment. All other factors, discipline, flying skills, knowledge, and situational awareness, support good judgment. Good judgment, in turn, supports all 3 major goals of airmanship: safety, effectiveness, and efficiency. Here's a personal view on judgment by Dr. Jensen, Ohio State University. He wrote the book Pilot Judgment, so he probably knows a little bit about this subject. But again, I extracted this from Kern's Redefining Airmanship. So Kern is really quoting him. There is a certain truth to the popular belief that judgment is just common sense applied to decision making. However, sense must imply knowledge and intense awareness, realization, and in-depth understanding of all the factors involved in the decision. So, as the man says, you've heard it more than once, common sense just isn't all that common. Judgment, like all other aspects of airmanship, must be viewed holistically as an interactive part of the airmanship whole. So judgment isn't a thing all by itself. It's a result of all of the bedrock principles, the practice of the bedrock principles, and the best knowledge you have in each one of those 5 pillars of knowledge. Judgment is demonstrated in almost everything an aviator does. It includes adequate mental and physical preparation for flight. It includes briefing, debriefings, and critiques. And I want to take just a minute here to talk about critiques, because that's a very important element in safety cultures and in safety management systems. The airlines went to a mandatory critique of every flight back in the early 80s, and good corporate operations and Part 135 operations started incorporating post-flight critiques as part of their procedures in the early 90s. And it's really a good thing to incorporate, and you don't need to be flying with somebody else to critique the flight. It's better to have 2 people looking at the flight and critique it together, but you can self-critique if that's all you have. There's a difference between critique and criticism. Criticism focuses on an individual. You did that wrong. Critique focuses on the happening. That didn't work out so well. What could we have done to do it better? What could we have done to avoid that situation, to not make that mistake? So that's the difference between criticism, which everybody has a negative reaction to and they lock up on when they start receiving criticism, and critique. Critique is talking about what happened and getting better, making it work better. So again, we'll talk about that in more detail when we talk about safety cultures and safety management systems. Very important aspect, though. As the pinnacle of a complex human equation, understanding and improving judgment requires a solid foundation of airmanship knowledge. So you've got to fill up those 5 pillars of knowledge just as high as you can get them. It also requires a process for study and improvement. And a process means a formal process, and I call that an airmanship development plan, and we'll talk about that in a later webinar. Let's take a look at the scope of poor judgment, what poor judgment results in. Poor judgment has a significant impact on all areas of aviation. The tragic results of poor judgment are in evidence in nearly every accident study conducted in recent years. And I'd echo that. Every one that I've read, I can always see that poor judgment underlying the error chain that led to the accident. In one 5-year study of general aviation accidents, decisional errors accounted for more than 50% of fatal errors. So again, if we can improve our judgment, we can make our flying much safer. Staying with the topic of the scope of poor judgment, a 10-year analysis of military human factors errors associated with mishaps identified 3 areas of poor judgment as causal factors more frequently than all other error types combined. And those are: pilots selected the wrong course of action, intentional failure to use an accepted procedure, and delay in taking the necessary action. So that's what happens. Those are the indicators that poor judgment was exercised, and these lead to accidents more frequently than not. Now here comes the question, and it's a big question. I've been asking myself this question for a few years. Is judgment an art or a science? I used to always think it was an art. I learned it from my mentors, from practice, from some reading on the subject, although until the last 10 years or so, there really wasn't much in the literature, our piloting literature, about the art or science of judgment. Judgment should be viewed, I think, as both a science and an art. It's an emerging science, and modern research has revealed certain attributes of judgment, certain personality types that are conducive or not to good judgment, and patterns of thought that result in good judgment. Part of that pattern of thought, or one example would be Kern's airmanship model, using that. And all of those things can lead to improved decision making. And so there again, you can learn those things, and you can train on them, and you can use them systematically to improve your judgment. Judgment, in my view, should also be viewed as art, because aeronautical decision making cannot be reduced to an if-then formulas that fit all situations. That's as of today. Now, if you believe that we're approaching the singularity with IT power, and we're going to have artificial intelligence right down the road, and we'll be able to have that in our cockpits, then this statement might not be so true. We can let the computers do the decision making, but that's a ways down the road, and maybe we'll never see that completely available to us as pilots. But right now, we have to use our good old Mark I brains to make decisions. There is an intuitive side to pilot judgment. So there's a process or a scientific side, but there's also an intuitive side. If you've got a gut feeling something's wrong, you better take steps to verify whether or not you're just a little over paranoid today, or there really is something wrong. But I can tell you from experience that gut feeling is right more times than it's wrong. Number 3, decision making is an acquired skill and can be systematically developed through knowledge and practice. So we can train you. You can get better. Let's define judgment for our purposes here working with Kern's airmanship model. Webster says that judgment is the process of forming an opinion or evaluation by discerning or comparing. Well, that's helpful, but not really honed in exactly on what we need to think about. Kern says judgment is the process of comparing and evaluating courses of action as defined by the pilot and the extended flight team. And that's probably a more accurate definition for us to use. The process of comparing and evaluating courses of action as defined by the pilot and the extended flight team. And it could be the pilot and the dispatcher, it could be the pilot and the maintenance lead, it could be a lot of different people on that team that are comparing and evaluating courses of action. And then judgment as the result. Part of judgment, big part of judgment, is situational assessment. The critical first step towards consistent good judgment is to effectively assess each situation. And of course, the situation is dynamic when we're flying, so we're constantly assessing the situation. Assessment of a specific situation links overall situational awareness, the big picture, to a specific decision. So in other words, that coming back to our example, alternator warning light comes on. That when you're assessing that particular situation, you have to link it to the overall big picture. Are you in the clouds? How long do you have to go? Is it day or night? Or so forth, to reach a specific decision. Then you have to ask yourself 3 simple questions. What is the nature of the problem? How much time do I have to work on the problem? Alternator warning light, is the battery discharging? Well, the book might say you've got up to 30 minutes on your battery. Don't count on it. So how much time do I have to solve this problem? Number 3, what are the risks associated with this problem? Well, the battery is discharging. If I don't get out of the clouds, what am I going to have left? Well, my attitude indicator is vacuum driven, so I'll have that. But my HSI is electric, so I won't have that. I'll lose my radio. I'll lose my GPS. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do now, right, if we lose the GPS? So again, what are the risks associated with this problem? So you have to ask yourself those 3 simple questions, part of the process. Here's what Kern has to say on judgment. The foundations and pillars of knowledge of airmanship form the basis for good judgment and decision making. So again, we have to practice the foundation principles of discipline, skill, and proficiency, and we have to fill up those 5 pillars of knowledge just as much as we can. And that forms the basis of good judgment and decision making. All good judgment and decision making is grounded in accurate situation assessment. That accurate is a key word. Judgment is not a magical quality. It can be taught and learned. The improvement process demands disciplined attention and constant self-critique. So we see that word discipline again. In the final analysis, our judgment is as good as we want to make it. Here's a final perspective. And I'm going to bring up the rhetorical question again because I want you to be thinking about this, how you're going to answer it when I ask you a little later on in our webinar series. But I'd like to see a show of hands now if you've already come up with an answer to the question. I don't care what the answer is. It could be yes or no. But let me see your hand, please. Raise your hand if you've already answering this question for yourself. I'll give you a minute to do that. Okay, I can see about half of you have answered that question for yourself already, and the other half has not. So I'm going to review those next steps that I suggested last time. Complete the Redefining Airmanship webinar series. Read Kern's Redefining Airmanship, the whole book, because again, this webinar series is just skimming the surface. Get in the airmanship loop. Go to the airmanshipexcellence.org website. Sign up for airmanship updates. There's going to be more and more information that you'll become aware of through that system as we move along here. And of course the big one is commit to a continuous airmanship development plan. The quicker you commit, the faster you'll get going on it and the better you'll get earlier. So now I've got a couple of questions for you if you don't mind. And let me open this up. Stand by. The polls. Okay, here's the first question. I'd like you to rate your current situational awareness level when you fly. Just think back to your last flight. How situationally aware were you throughout the flight? Was your situational awareness perfect? Was it merely great? Was it not so great? Or was it lousy? So about half of you voted so far. I'll give you a little more time. Okay, I'm going to close the poll, share the results with you. 0% said perfect. That's a relief. The last perfect flight I flew was, can't remember. I don't think I ever had one. So I'm glad to see nobody is over the edge on that one. Great, 75%. That's good. That means you have confidence that you're using the right techniques and procedures. And I hope you believe that you should increase it that last 25% though. And not so great, thank you for being honest, 25% said that, and I'll bet you that's because you just haven't been flying very much recently. That degrades situational awareness rapidly. So, okay, the second question. Do you believe that you can improve situational awareness to whatever degree you have the will and discipline to achieve? Yes, no, or not sure yet? Okay, looks like all of you have voted. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. Oh, great. All of you say yes. That's good. I'm glad that you are personally convinced that you can get better at that. Okay, hang on. We're going to another question here. Oops, sorry about that. I hit the wrong button. This system is nice, this GoToWebinar system, but things like this, it's not real user-friendly. All right, back in the loop. Rate your judgment, your current judgment when you fly. Last time you flew, how was your judgment? Was it infallible? Do you usually make good decisions? Could you do better at it, making decisions? Could your judgment be better? Or, I just trust my luck, not my judgment. Okay, looks like all of you have voted. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. Now, here again, I'm glad to see nobody thinks they're infallible. And that's a good rating. 75% of you think you normally make good decisions. And again, that 25%, it could be better. And thank goodness nobody checked that last one. I trust my luck and not my judgment. Although I have run into some pilots that's their attitude. All right, I have one more question for you. Do you think, based on what you heard here this evening, that you can improve your judgment? Yes, no, or not sure yet? All right, all of you have voted, and 100% of you say yes, and I'm really glad to see that. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to hide that. And John Munson, I see that you have your hand up. Do you have a question? All right, I don't know if the problem's on my end or yours, John, but I'm not, when I unmute you, I don't get anything. So, Ken Stone, I see your hand up. I'm going to unmute you. Do you have a question?
Actually, I did not have a question. Sorry.
That's okay. Just want to check. Again, this system is a little bit cumbersome in that area, so thank you. I'm going to mute you again here. And Mike Jones, Mike Jones, do you have a question? Mike? Okay, I don't hear you, so I'm going to mute you again. All right, there are no other questions, so we're going to move on. I'll take it. Let me just check one thing here to make sure that there's no text questions. I have to click on a button. Okay, no text questions showing. All right. Here's what we're going to do in the next session. We're going to talk in depth about safety cultures and safety management systems. And these are really two big areas that you probably haven't been thinking much about. And you can do a lot to improve your airmanship without flying within a safety culture, without having a safety management system wrapped around you. You can do it, but you'll see, I think, after we go through the next session, that's a supercharger for your airmanship if you are flying within a safety culture and you have a safety management system to help you out. And we're going to take a look at those in depth in the next session. Well, that's all there is for this evening. There's my contact information. You can get me by phone, you can send an email, or you can go to airmanshipexcellence.org. And again, if you want to download the recordings of Session 1, Session 2, you can access them through airmanshipexcellence.org. Just go to that website, click on the Airmanship Excellence Archives, and you will see the webinars listed. Just click on the webinar you want, and we'll send you a link and a password to download the video, the recording of the first two sessions. Now, some of you have sent me emails and requested them, or gone to the website and requested those first two recordings. Sorry they haven't been available yet. There have been, in both sessions, which actually it was 4 different recordings, I've had a lot of audio problems. And I have somebody, a technician, working on the sound quality, and he's got it as good as it's going to get, and we're going to put those up probably tomorrow and make them available. But I will send you an email letting you know when they're available. This session, Session 3, I usually wait, and I think I'll do the same thing this time, until we have the second live Session 3, which will take place this coming Saturday morning, because sometimes there are refinements between the sessions. And then I'll record that, and that should be available fairly quickly after Saturday. So again, thank you for attending. I'm looking forward to working with you as we move through the rest of the webinars. Have a good evening.